Hi, Blastpop here. Today I'm looking at the deluxe edition of The Dark Valley by Tedis Racer. This is the Eastern Front in World War II, 1941 to 1945. This is essentially the second edition, or the deluxe version as it's advertised. The primary difference is, from a physical standpoint, is it's got a new map, and the boards are mounted, and also you got thicker counters, revised rule book, scenario book, and probably other supplemental changes that occurred between editions. While the first edition is perfectly playable and a great game, this particular edition steps it up a notch or two in terms of physical production and what is offered, in addition to a larger box to hold the mounted board for the game. This game consists of two maps, three counter sheets, charts, tables, a rules book, and a scenario book, or a playbook. As you can see, the box is the 3-inch size style box that is meant to take it a knock and not get crushed or otherwise damaged for the most part. Although the copy that I have here did see a little bit of crushing damage here, but nothing serious in the scheme of things. In terms of the back of the box, it shows a picture of the map, some description material about the game, counters, the fact that it's high solitaire suitability, of moderate complexity, and what's included in the box. I will also say that there is some supplemental material for Barbarossa to Berlin. One of the Dark Valley maps is back printed with a mounted board of that game, presumably the latest version of it. And also it comes with a sheet and a half of counters for that game, although I won't delve into it any further in this video. Also within the box is I guess the best way to describe it is an insert that is more for protection than anything else, so that the components don't move along and around too much, so they won't be damaged in transit. Essentially, it's a picture of this board cover, and is not very useful once the game arrives in your hands. You have a rule book. It runs 28 pages, including the covers. Generally speaking, if you take a look at it, relatively large print, very easy on the eyes, very easy to read, 2-column, moderately illustrated with pieces and such. The game uses a chit pull system, where you're not quite sure what's going to happen next, so consequently it lends itself to a relatively high solitaire suitability. And it's a fairly detailed game system, but nothing that a experienced wargamer would have any real problems with. You know, your reinforcements, combat movement, replacements, conversions of forces, Soviet conversions to guards. The game essentially starts units off in the divisional level scope for the Soviets, and allows you to build corps up during the course of the game to add staying power and punch compared to the rifle divisions. Air power, air bombardment, German air supply, strategic movement. You have your action phases, where the heart of the game system occurs, and once you have an initiative segment and determine who's the initiative holder, you go into the action rounds. And That's truly the heart of the system. Rules for leadership, Stavka, all the traditional items you would expect to see in a war game. You have 2 sets of combat tables. Your typical advances, retreats after combat. You got fortified zones, defensive work, special fortified zones, artillery, logistics, supply. Kind of goes hand in hand with logistics, actually. Rules for miners, assault guns, tigers, headquarters, and leaders. So ultimately, you've got a lot of information with respect to special units in Chrome, which is really nice, so the game doesn't feel too generic. You have an index on the back. Follow it up with a scenario book. And the scenarios you have are Barbarossa, which is also the starting of the campaign. Fall Blau, which is the German attempt to move on Stalingrad. Operation Citadel, which is Kursk. Operation Bagration, which is the destruction of Army Group Center. Gives you your special rules. The information isn't all that detailed, what I would expect to see for a game of this scale. Fairly easy entree into the game and to the scenarios. I find the idea of an Operation Citadel, I find appealing. And probably after Barbarossa, the next scenario I'd probably tackle. And then the destruction of Army Group Center in Bagration. From there, you got designer's notes. And you have an extended example of play, which is based on the German Barbarossa campaign. So it gives you an opportunity to see how the game plays in action. And there's several pages of this. And you can kind of follow that along. And presumably, if you're so inclined, instead of just merely following along, you could probably set up the pieces and follow some of the examples if you're interested or are running into any particular difficulties. You have your abbreviated sequence of play here, which I would suggest maybe you stop the video and look at it for a moment to familiarize yourself with it. In any case, nothing too complex. You get 2 sets of charts, one for each player, double-sided. Your combat results table, and it tells you in what situation each side uses that particular combat results table. Bombardment, Axis Depot Advanced table, which could also be construed as conversion of the rail lines, presumably, from the standard European gauge to the Russian gauge. And as you can see here, there's a duplicate and you have the combat terrain effects chart. And it's an impact on movement and combat and bombardment. Additionally, the chits, which I alluded to, gives you the availability of them for any particular game turn or period of game turns. And then on this side, you have the sequence of play and weather effects chart. You have special rules reminders, little hints and tips, and additional hints and tips, so you don't get lost in the minutia. And then about replacements, conversions, withdrawals, Soviet replacements. 3 sheets of counters are included. They're almost popping off of the counter sheet. They're, I believe, 1/2 inch size counters. There's too much glare. And the counters are the thicker brown core counters. You can see there's divisions, tank units, minor allies for the Germans, SS, back of the first counter sheet. Please feel free to pause if you want to examine anything in a little more detail. Soviet counter sheet. This is counter sheet 2. These are all Soviet or Russian forces. Additionally, you have setup information on a number of these counters on the back when there's no combat backprint, because there's merely one step, so you can physically see where the unit goes. For instance, this unit sits up in Moscow. A little bit more on that later. Finally, for the counter sheets, counter sheet 3, which includes more Soviet forces, Soviet guards, air forces for the Soviets, and system and other supply markers and such. And on your reverse side, okay. Now, and also you receive a die for each player in the appropriate national color, or for the ground forces, reds for the Soviets, who are red, and Feldgrau for the German Wehrmacht. One of the things that it being a deluxe edition, and something I want to expound on momentarily, is that all the information as far as the setup is concerned are on the counters. Now, unless you have a good handle on all your counters, and you're sure you have them, I find traditionally in those kind of games that only have setups on counters and not in the rules book or with a chart, I'm always second guessing. From like a previous play especially, I thought there was more counters involved, and so you start wondering if you actually have counters. Now here they have not included a duplicate set of not a duplicate set of counters, but a picture of the counters in the rule book. So my suggestion, or at a minimum for a player, is to scan their counter sheet to make sure that they can check to make sure they have all of them when they're setting up a scenario. But more importantly, if you bear with me but a moment here, on Board Game Geek, there are some setup sheets that are available that were posted some years ago by Jay Townsend, and he reposted from somebody else at somebody else's creation, and it will tell you what each force has and what's its start and what's in group center, north and south, and so on. You also have initial Soviet setup, and also similar for reinforcements. I won't go into the details there. Highly recommended that you download those for your reference and peace of mind to make sure you're not missing any pieces. The map, which is mounted, it's nice and solid. We'll move into that area now, and I'll let you scope it out a little bit to see what's offered. Very nicely done, very tastefully done. I'm not sure who did the map. I should have checked that out, and it looks very much like a Mark Simonich effort, and if it isn't, it's a good imitator. Now on the map for the scenarios, since the scenarios are essentially free setup and not hex by hex, you have the lines of demarcation for the various scenarios. So you can see where Kursk is here on the map. You can see the outline of the Kursk salient. Of course, it corresponds on the map. And of course, Barbarossa starts at the national borders, but the scenarios don't so nicely conform to that. You have the fortified lines up in Moscow. So I'll give you a tour. You can just take a look. Give you a sense of what's included. Very much a fan of this artwork of the maps. This is going to hit my game table, and soon. I'll move the box here so we can look a little bit more at the the western portion of the two-part board. Boards each appear to be 22 by 34, which is more or less the standard full-size map. Very nice indeed. So, very much a high quality product, and it's available what I consider for a reasonable price. Good work, GMT. This has been Blastpop. Thank you. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Bye.